Welcome back to Real Stories, Real Families, where we dive into the everyday challenges and triumphs of families from all walks of life. Today we have Li and Mei Zhang, a couple who've been navigating life in the US while raising two teenage kids. They're here to talk about their experiences as first-generation Chinese immigrants and the challenges of balancing tradition with modern American life. Li, Mei, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having us. We're happy to share our story.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
So I'd love to start with your journey to the US. You both came here in your 30s, is that right? What was that transition like for you, especially now that you've built a life in Bethesda?
Oh wow, yes, it feels like a long time ago. I was 31 when we moved here, and it was hard at first. We had this dream of building a better life, but the language, the culture, everything was so different. I went from being in Beijing, where everything felt familiar, to navigating this very different world. I had an MBA, but didn't know where to start with my career here.
Yeah, for me, it was a bit smoother in terms of work. I already had a job lined up, so that helped. I'm a software engineer, so the tech world is it's global in a way. The real challenge wasn't the work, it was more about figuring out how to balance everything. Like being a good husband, father, and also keeping our Chinese traditions alive. Sometimes it feels like I'm living two lives.
Yes, definitely. We want our kids to succeed in school here, but we also don't want them to forget their roots. It's a constant balancing act,
I can only imagine. So you have two children, Jing 17 and Hui 15. They're teenagers now. How has that been?
Oh, it's been a ride. Teenagers are. Well, teenagers are teenagers, right? I think one of the biggest struggles is seeing them grow up in such a different world than we did. They're very American in many ways. They want to go to parties, and they're not as interested in speaking Mandarin at home anymore. It's a little scary because I feel like they're drifting away from our culture sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. We try to make sure they know where they come from. We celebrate Chinese holidays, we speak Mandarin at home as much as we can, but it's tough. They spend most of their day in school, and they're surrounded by their American friends. It's not the same as when we were kids.
Do you ever feel like there's a disconnect between what you want for them and what they want for themselves?
Oh, absolutely. Jing, our oldest, she's already talking about college, and it's so competitive. I feel like there's so much pressure on her to excel academically. And honestly, sometimes I feel like I'm putting that pressure on her too. I'm constantly worried. Am I doing enough? Am I pushing too hard? I want her to have the best opportunities, but at what cost?
Yeah. It's hard. I work long hours, and sometimes I'm not as present as I should be at home. Me ends up handling a lot of the household and parenting stuff, and that's not fair to her. But I also want to provide financially, so it's exhausting trying to balance it all. I think we're both just trying to give them everything we didn't have, but it can feel like we're losing them in the process.
That sounds really tough. Have you ever thought about seeking help or talking to someone, like a therapist, to navigate those feelings?
In our culture, mental health is how do I say it? There's stigma around it. We've talked about it, but it's not easy to take that step. I think there's this fear that if we ask for help, it means we failed somehow. Like, we should just be able to figure it out on our own.
Yeah, we were raised to be self-reliant, and asking for help with personal things, especially mental health, feels uncomfortable. But we've been under a lot of stress, and sometimes I wonder if we need to let go of that stigma.
It's so important to acknowledge that. You're definitely not alone in feeling that way. A lot of families struggle with this, especially when cultural expectations clash with the reality of modern life. Let's shift gears a bit. You're both very involved in your community, especially in the Chinese American circles in Bethesda. How has that helped you stay connected to your roots?
Oh, it's been really important for us. We attend cultural events. Our kids go to Chinese language programs. It's one of the ways we try to keep them connected to their heritage. We've also made some great friends who understand what we're going through. It helps to have a support system of people who are in the same situation as us.
Yeah, the community has been a lifeline. But even there, it can be tricky. Sometimes there's this unspoken pressure to have it all together, to show that we're doing well both professionally and with our family. It's not always easy to admit when things aren't perfect.
Exactly. There's this expectation that because we've worked so hard to get where we are, we should be, immune to problems. But we're human. We worry, we stress, we argue. It's just part of life, but sometimes it feels like we can't talk about that openly.
That's such a real struggle. You're trying to uphold these traditional values while also adapting to a new culture. And it sounds like there's a lot of pressure from both sides. So what keeps you grounded through all of this?
For me, it's family. At the end of the day, despite all the challenges, I know we're in this together. We're doing the best we can for our kids, and even when things get tough, I hold on to that.
Same here. I think about why we came to this country in the first place, to give our children a better future. That's what drives me. And yeah, sometimes I fall short, but knowing we're building something together as a family, that helps me keep going.
I love that. It's clear that you both have such a deep commitment to your family, and that's really inspiring. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. I know a lot of people listening will really connect with what you've said.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you. It was good to talk about this.
And thank you all for listening to Real Stories, Real Families. We'll see you next time.